Hey guys, Will from Around the Grounds here, and in today's video we're going to be doing round 2 NRL tips for the 2022 season. We're going to be looking at the team list again, and we're going to be deciding who we think are going to win the games. Last week I believe I got 3 out of 8, so not a very good start, but who could have got more than that really, because it was very hard to predict those games, especially the results we saw. There were some very, very odd results that I don't think anyone was expecting. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright guys, now starting off for the Thursday night game at 8 PM at Amy Park, we have the Storm versus the Rabbitohs. It was an interesting first round for both this team. Obviously, the Rabbitohs losing to the Broncos 11-4 at Suncorp Stadium. They had quite a disappointing performance there by their standards. They pretty much got out-muscled by the Brisbane Broncos, especially in the forward packs, and they just made too many errors and whatnot, and they just weren't clinical enough. The Storm, their first half was probably just as bad as the Rabbitohs, if I'm going to be completely honest, for their standards. They were trailing 10-4 to the Tigers at half-time, and Craig Bellamy, obviously being the coach he is, got his side fired up, and they turned it around and they got the points in the end. But I don't think any of the Storm or Craig Bellamy would be very impressed with that performance, so I'm sure they'll be hammering into them this week so they have a better performance. With that being said, Cameron Munster will be playing this week for the Storm. He's in, and also Latrell Mitchell is a huge in for the Rabbitohs. So this game is going to be very, very competitive now, and I think this is going to be an absolute blockbuster. This one is very, very hard to split. The Storm are at Amy Park, and I don't think they've played there for a very, very long time, so I'm going to give them the slight edge here. I'm going to go for a Storm 18 to the Rabbitohs 14 win here at Amy Park. Alright guys, now moving on to the 6 o'clock game here, we've got the Dragons versus the Panthers at the Dragons home ground at Netstrata Jubilee Stadium in Sydney. This game's going to be quite interesting because the Dragons had a really good round 1 performance, but so did the Panthers. The Panthers were pretty much excellent in everything they did against Manly. They outclassed them, outmuscled them. Literally every aspect of the game, they were better than Manly. The Dragons, they were quite impressive too. Their attack seemed to be flowing well. Mikael Radulava was a beast. He scored 3 tries. The Panthers will be without Moses Leota for this game as he's coming to some shoulder injury, which will see him out for quite some time. But besides that, Panthers are unchanged, and it looks like the Dragons are pretty much unchanged as well. So this will be a very interesting battle. We've obviously got Tyrell Sloan. He's a really good rookie that's just come into the game. He's only played a few games, but he's absolutely a star player at the moment. So we will see if he can keep this up. And this is a very good test for him and the rest of the Dragons against the Premiers. But with that being said, this game, I kind of feel like even though the Dragons seem to be they had a good start of the season, I don't think that's going to last. I think the Panthers look really good at the moment. Even without Nathan Cleary, I think they'll get the job done here, and I think they'll do it well. So I'm going to predict a Dragons 12 to a Panthers 32 win. Alright guys, now moving on to the third game here, we've got the Sydney Roosters versus the Manly Seagulls, 15th versus 16th at the Sydney Cricket Ground at 8 PM. Both these teams came off quite disappointing losses for teams that were so hyped up over the off-season, and I bet you they both all got a rev up from their coaches, and all the players will be ready to go for this match. The best thing is for either side that one of these teams is going to win, and it's going to kickstart their season, I reckon, no matter which team it is. Obviously the Roosters, a shock loss to the night, that is quite disappointing. I guess Manly's loss to the Panthers is a bit more understandable, just based on the Panthers being the premiers. In terms of the team list here, both teams look unchanged, besides Joseph Manu has come in for the Roosters in centre, which he's a big in, so I'm putting him in for a big season and probably a big match to show that. Based off last week, there's not much I can do to predict these teams, so I'm going to give this one to the home side. I'm going to make this a close game. I think it's going to be quite close to the last 5 minutes or so. I'm going to predict the Roosters 20 to Manly 18. Alright guys, now moving on to the first game of Saturday here, we have the Titans versus the Warriors at 3 PM at the Gold Coast. Both these teams came off losses. Titans, they had a narrow loss against the Eels. I thought they played quite well. They are very good attacking. However, their defense is what let them down. And then being able to shut the game off also came into account for them losing. For the Warriors, they were quite disappointing against the Dragons. Their discipline was bad, the errors were bad, and they just couldn't hold the ball. And at the end of the day, if you can't hold the ball, you can't score points, and you're most likely going to concede as well. This game, they've got Reece Walsh back here as well, and Ash Taylor will be starting as halfback as Sean Johnson is injured. The Titans look to be pretty much unchanged from what I can see. So yeah, this is going to be a very good game. I was going to predict the Titans win here, but because Reece Walsh is back and because Ashley Taylor is starting, there's just something about me that says that this is their best team in terms of their spine. Having Wade Egan, Ashley Taylor, Chanel Harris-Tavita and Reece Walsh is at their spine, I think it's a pretty good spine. And there's something telling me they're just going to get the win here. So I'm going to predict the Titans 22 and the Warriors 26 score here on the Gold Coast. Alright guys, now moving on to the second game of Saturday at 5:30, we've got the Sharks versus the Eels at PointsBet Stadium, Sydney. This game's going to be tough to call because both teams had a good performance last week. However, the Sharks obviously lost to the Raiders in the last couple of minutes of the game, and the Eels only just held off the Titans there, and they weren't looking their best at parts in that game too. Both these teams did score a decent amount of points. It's not the attack that's going to win this game, it's going to be the defense. And the Eels, they looked a bit leaky last week against the Titans, so hopefully they can tighten that up a bit here because they're going to need to. Wonga Blake is being pushed onto the wing because Sean Russell can't play, and I believe Tom Opacek is in the centres now. For the Sharks, they look pretty much unchanged. Cameron McInnes is the reserve, the 19, and it wouldn't surprise me if he gets put onto the interchange during the week. Bryce Cartwright also comes into the interchange for the Eels, so that would be good impact for him. This one's tricky to call. I'm going to lean to the Sharks here just because they're at home, but this could go either way and it wouldn't surprise me. I think it's going to be a very close game, and because of that, I'm going to predict the Sharks 18 and Eels 16. Alright guys, now moving on to the last game of Saturday at 7:35, we have the Cowboys versus the Raiders at the Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. On paper this game looks like it might go to the way of the Raiders based on the results last week, but the Cowboys were quite decent. They defended well, but they sort of struggled in attack a bit because they only scored 4 points against the Bulldogs side, which remains to be seen whether or not the Bulldogs actually are a good defensive team or not, but historically they haven't been, so we're going to assume just for this game that the Cowboys attack was struggling. For the Raiders here, they played quite well against the Sharks, but they sort of switched off in the second half, which I'm sure Ricky Stewart wouldn't be happy about. But if they can switch on for the full 80 minutes here, I think they'll probably win this game quite comfortably. In terms of the teams, for the Raiders, Brad Schneider and Josh Hodgson are out, which are big blows for them. And for the Cowboys, they look to be fairly full strength here. If Brad Schneider and Josh Hodgson would play, I would say this game would be a bit of a blowout. But because of that, I'm still going to give the Raiders a win here, but it might be a bit closer. Because of that, I think the Cowboys are going to be quite competitive this year. But just because of the Raiders being quality and having quality players, I'm going to say the Cowboys 16 and the Raiders 24. Alright, now moving on to the first game of Sunday at 4 PM, we have the Knights versus the West Tigers. The Knights, geez, what a win they got against the Roosters. I don't think anyone saw that one coming. Obviously not myself, because I did not tip them, and they played an outstanding game against the Roosters. The Tigers, they were really good for the first half against the Storm, and then obviously got outclassed by the Storm, and they were probably a bit tired towards the end of the game, and they just fell away, which has been unfortunate because I still think they look quite good. It was a bit of an improvement from what we saw of them last year. But for both these teams, it's just about consistency, and I think whoever's the most consistent out of these two teams will win this match. For the team news, Daniel Saifida returns for the Knights, and he's a big in. Obviously, Dominic Young stays on the wing and he gets to keep his spot. For the Tigers, James Tarmer was back in, Jacob Little is in, as well as Stafford Toa, but I don't think Toa's going to be playing. He's just named on the reserves list. Just based off the recent form last year as well as round one, I'm going to give this win to the Knights because I think they're just probably a better team here. I've tipped the Tigers to be either last or second last this year, and I haven't seen anything from the first round to suggest otherwise, so if they can surprise me, then that would be awesome, but because I don't think they will, I'm going to say the Knights 30 will win this game to the Tigers 16 at Newcastle. Alright guys, now moving on to the last game of the round, we have the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs versus the Brisbane Broncos, and surprisingly, after round one, both these teams are winners. You wouldn't probably have predicted that after the way that they finished last year or the season they had last year, but this season's a new season, new beginning, so as we can see with these teams, obviously the Bulldogs have a completely new team to last year, so many good players that they've recruited. For the Broncos, they've recruited Adam Reynolds, and he'll be starting this match, and he's a huge in for them. I think he'll control the team well as long as he can stay injury free, and I expect him to do that this game. I think he's going to allow the other players like we saw, like Herbie Farnworth and Tessie New, to absolutely just grow as players and become stars, which I think they're on the rise. For the Bulldogs, I think they've got the players, they've got the quality. We obviously know how good Josh Adokar is, we know how good Matt Burton is. It's just about getting all those players together, get them all on the same page. I don't think we really saw that against the Cowboys. There was one try that I saw Bulldogs score that was disallowed. That was probably the only time that I saw them link up well, all those new players, and have those combinations working well. So I think it's going to take time for the Bulldogs to get to where people expect them to get this year, and because of that, I think the Broncos with Adam Reynolds, they're just going to be a bit too strong here for the Bulldogs, so I'm going to predict the Bulldogs 12 to the Broncos 24. Alright guys, now that is the end of the video. That is the end of my NRL Round 2 tips for 2022. Drop your tips in the comments and I'll be sure to check them out, guys. And make sure to like and subscribe the video. That will help me out a lot. I really appreciated all the love that went into the first Round 1 tips video. So yeah, so with that being said, guys, that's the end of the video. Take care.